All right, welcome to tonight's segment of the faculty lecture series. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Jess Gallardi. I am professor and director here, and I coordinate the lecture series. So thanks for attending tonight's lecture. Keep an eye out for upcoming lectures. I do have rack cards with the schedule if you want to come up later and get one on your way out. The next lecture will be next Thursday, March 7th, featuring Dr. Rena Kirkland of Psychology. This evening's event is presented by Dr. Chelsea Oden, instructor of music in the School of Visual Performing Arts. Dr. Oden is an alumni and current instructor of music. She earned her PhD in music theory from the University of Oregon in 2021 with the dissertation, "There is a Body in the Sound, Timbre and Embodiment in the Overlap of Film, Music, and Dance." She has given papers on musical multimedia at national and international conferences in theory and musicology. Her recent SMT5 article, "We Are Dancing, We Are Flying," looks at how timbre and meter can create a feeling of flight in dance scenes. And her chapter, "Timbre and Music Film, Making Magic Through Tone Color," is forthcoming in Music Analysis and Film, Counting Up the Score, edited by Frank Lehman. In her words, tonight's lecture is going to be about how music has been described as having the power to create, alter, and distort, or even destroy time. The same might be said of sci-fi and fantasy media, brimming with time travelers and time tinklers. Sci-fi and fantasy toy with time's momentum, its malleability, and its very structure. Music is the sound of time passing, or better yet, if music is time, then the music that underscores time tempering in sci-fi and fantasy media deserves our special attention. This presentation explores music's power to embody time in sci-fi and fantasy films, series, and video games. First examining case studies such as Tenet and The Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask, to show how music can express time's momentum through its own tempo and direction. Then a focus on music and time's malleability by exploring scenes that feature time travel via time machines and wormholes. Futurama reference. Star Trek Discovery, specifically season 2 of it. Time loops, Doctor Strange, and multi-timelines. Finally, drawing on metaphysics, she will investigate how music can evoke the very structure of time through a close reading of the montage sequences framing the 2016 sci-fi film Arrival. Together, these case studies invite us to re-examine our own relationships with time and music's ability to play with our perception of it. So help me in welcoming Dr. Oden.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be reiterating a little bit of that as we go. I'm just so excited to be here with what I assume are people that are sci-fi and music and fantasy fans. And if you're not and you're just here for it, I'm excited about that too. So thank you for being here. I'm super, super interested in this topic and grateful for the opportunity to share it with you. As you heard, music has been described as having the power to create, alter, distort, or even destroy time. This is quite the power. Scholars have discussed the ways music can accelerate time, stretch time, reverse time, split time, and seemingly paradoxically evoke timelessness. These same feats are staples of sci-fi and fantasy media. Characters travel through time, they freeze time, reverse time, traverse multiple timelines, get stuck in time loops, and sometimes they meet higher dimensional beings who transcend linear time altogether. That music and time tampering have so much in common. Begs the question, how might sci-fi and fantasy media use music as time? So today, we'll look at several examples from sci-fi and fantasy films, series, and video games that play with time. And we'll focus on the three aspects you heard mentioned before. First, time's momentum. How can music speed up time, slow down time, reverse the direction of time, or stop time? And second, the malleability of time. How can music fold time, loop time, branch time? Third, time's very structure. Does music tell us that time is linear, with an unknown future, becoming the present, creating the past? Or can music tell us that time might be possible to experience in any direction, that it is not linear? Before I go any further, I feel I owe any sci-fi or fantasy purists out there an explanation as to why I'm grouping these two genres together. And I have a credible source, in the words of Hermes from Futurama.
It's okay, Professor, and it's understandable. After all, any sufficiently advanced magic is indistinguishable from science.
So if you're not familiar, Hermes is rephrasing science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke's third law, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So I think it's permissible to group sci-fi and fantasy together today. Let's dive into music and time's momentum. As we think about time moving, I invite you to sit with this quote from music scholar Bruce Brubaker, who says, "Music is the sound of time passing." And we'll begin with time speeding up. So there's a famous example from Futurama that shows us one way music can express time's acceleration, and this is by increasing its own tempo or speed. Let's take a listen. So in this clip, as time speeds up, so does the music. We can see this more clearly by measuring beats per minute, or BPM. So 1 beat a second would be 60 BPM, right? 1. All right, so about here. This starts at 100 beats per minute, so a little bit faster than that. And it accelerates past 175. So I've marked that on the left side of the screen, and you'll see a new tempo marking come in every time we've kind of established a new tempo, but it's really accelerating the whole time. Let's look at another way music can express time's acceleration in another clip from Futurama. So in this one, Fry, the professor, and Bender use a time machine to fast forward to the end of the universe. This clip is about a minute long, and as time speeds up, I invite you to try to keep time with the music, keep track of the pulse, and also to listen to what musical instruments you hear. See what you can identify.
The end of the universe. Thanks for the air and whatnot. Whoa. Hey, what was the purpose of life anyway?
Who knows? Probably some hogwash about the human spirit.
Sounds about right.
The stars are receding. All the vast emptiness. Yeah, I can take a hint. The last proton should be decaying about now.
Bye, last proton.
And here we are, the end of the universe.
What happens next? You have to watch the show. So that tempo, that speed, this music, would you describe it as fast? Not really. No, it's pretty slow. It's just over 50 beats per minute on, roughly. It changes a bit over the course of the cue. So the music's speed is not expressing time's motion. It's not expressing the speed of time anyway. But you might have noticed there is a regular pulse every 3 beats. And you can hear this especially well at the end of the clip. And I'll play that again.
The last
1,
proton should be decaying
2,
about now.
3,
My last
1,
proton,
2, 3,
Here we are.
1.
The end of the universe.
That regular emphasis is something we call meter. And I'm going to teach you how to conduct that. So, here is your conducting pattern for triple meter. We call this triple meter. There's an emphasis every 3 beats. Your beat 1, count 1, is down. 2 is away from the body. 3 is back up. Practice that a little bit on your own. Down, away, up, down, away, up, down. Lovely. Away, up. Excellent. I hope to see all of you in the music building. So now I'm going to give you an opportunity to practice this newfound skill in conducting with the end of that clip again. I'll play it again and see if you can keep time. And I'll help out up here as well. Conducting in 3. 2, 3.
The last proton
1,
should be decaying
2,
about now.
3.
My last
1,
proton,
2, 3.
Here we are.
1,
The end of the
2,
universe.
3. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. I saw some of you do like the crescendo at the end too. That was fantastic. But okay, so what does triple meter have to do with the way we experience time? And why is it appropriate for a scene that involves accelerating to the end of the universe? Well, triple meter has a pendulum built into it. Let me explain. So, as a 2-legged person, if I'm going to walk to triple meter, I would start off with my left foot, perhaps. 1, 2, 3. And now I'm ready to do my next 3 beats. I'm going to scoot back so I don't walk off the stage for you all. And for beat 1, though, I have to start with my right foot. 1, 2, 3. So to walk to triple meter, I have to do this emphasis on the left side, emphasis on the right side. And so there's a lilt built into triple meter. And you might recognize this pattern of movement from the waltz, where this mismatch between 2 feet and 3 beats translates into a series of spins and turns. In fact, early descriptions of the waltz focus on the way the world blurred for someone who was spinning through its dance steps. And we can see that in this quote from Goethe's 1774 novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther. The waltz started and the dancers whirled around each other like planets in the sky. I felt myself flying with her like the wind till I lost sight of everything else. So triple meter connects us with the feeling of acceleration in spinning and lilting, but there's also a sensation of time that comes from this. The music scholar Raymond Monell describes this feeling of time as infinitely extensible, a present that is always present. And he calls this lyric time, associates it specifically with triple meter and with waltzes. So this seems very appropriate for a cosmic level of time, for the time of the universe. What about instrumentation? How many of you heard the singing voice, like the choral voices, voices? Yeah, okay, good. What about the strings or the orchestra? Yeah, awesome. And anybody hear like the brass crescendo at the end? It's very low. Yeah. So I'm going to focus specifically on the voice and the brass. And they do some really cool things for this scene, in my opinion. So the voice is sustained on just a neutral vowel sound. It's not singing a particular word. And this references chants performed in Western cathedrals that would elongate a single syllable over several notes, which you can see here. There's the ya of Alleluia and several notes. And then you can see the next syllable and several notes that carry over even to the next line. So this wordless vowel evokes this practice a bit. It kind of recalls this chant that connects people and has connected people with the divine, with the eternal. It takes on this symbolism. The brass near the end also have divine symbolism, both in Islamic and Christian theology. They make references to angels playing trumpets, so a brass instrument, to announce the end of time. Let's listen to this ending one more time with that context in mind.
The last proton should be decaying about now.
Bye, last proton.
And here we are, the end of the universe.
Together, these musical sounds, or timbres, the chant-like vocals and the heralding brass, join with this endless lilting presence of triple meter to embody the universe's cosmic time. When the universe ends, to me, it's very impactful because music has given us the sounds of eternity, the sounds of forever, of something ceaseless, and suddenly they are silenced. What about slowing down time? In The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask, Zelda gives Link a magical ocarina capable of manipulating time, and she teaches him the Song of Time. It sounds like this. To slow time, rather than playing the Song of Time slowly, Link actually plays the opening motif of the Song of Time backwards, kind of resisting time's forward motion. And this is called the inverted Song of Time. It sounds like this. I'll play those back to back just so you can hear the reversal a bit more. And I want to point out, I'm not connected to anything. Okay. These two notes go up. These two notes descend. It's kind of hard to pick out the flipping of the pattern, but paying attention to those middle two notes, I think, helps make that more clear. So here they are back to back. What about stopping time altogether? In a famous scene from the game Chrono Trigger, music evokes a moment frozen in time. So in this excerpt, sustained tones, the ya, evoke a kind of stasis. We also hear this percussive sort of raindrop sound, byum, 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 that to me sounds a bit like raindrops falling, or water droplets falling in a cave. And I think this is a cool way to read this space as a moment tucked away from the regular passage of time. It's kind of in its own space. Let's listen to it again. There's another really interesting example of freezing time in Futurama, but we spend so much time with Futurama that I'm going to move forward, even though I love it. Because we have to talk about reversing time, and this next example is super cool. So music can be acoustically reversed to physically embody time running backwards. We can listen to sounds as they would be backwards in time. The film Tenet makes extensive use of this, as objects and characters reverse their own direction in time. So here's a 1 and 30 seconds long clip of, featuring John David Washington as the protagonist, that is his name, and Clemens Poisey as the scientist, explaining kind of the premise of this film.
One of these duets is like us, traveling forwards through time. The other one's going backwards. Can you tell which is which? How about no? It's inverted. Its entropy runs backwards, so to our eyes its movement is reversed. We think it's a type of inverse radiation triggered by nuclear fission.
You didn't make it.
I don't know how yet.
So where'd it come from?
Someone's manufacturing them in the future. They're streaming back at us. Try it. You have to have dropped it.
How can it move before I touch it?
From your point of view, you caught it. From the bullet's point of view, you dropped it.
But cause comes before effect.
No, that's just the way we see time.
Well, what about free will?
That bullet wouldn't have moved if you hadn't put your hand there. Either way we run the tape, you made it happen. Don't try to understand it. Feel it.
Instinct.
So as she says, we have to feel it. We have to feel time moving backwards. And the music helps us do just this. I want to zero in on that last bit of this clip so you can hear how the sound of the bass guitar is reversed in time. And to help you hear this, I've included waveform diagrams showing the sound wave of the direction that you would hear the guitar, whether it's going backward in time or forward in time.
Don't try to understand it. Feel it.
Instinct.
Something that can help us key into this reversed sound even more is to think about the sound envelope. So this is a way of mapping the shape of a sound over time. The beginning of the sound we call the attack. After we have this initial piece of the sound, the da. We have a slight decay, perhaps, sustain, and then as the sound decays to silence, we get the release. So decay and release are similar but different. And so for a guitar, for a bass guitar, we would expect a sound envelope, something like this, with a harsh attack, bop, bo, that kind of like fades away a little bit, yeah. And we would expect the reverse of that to do this, whoop, whoop, as opposed to boom, yeah. What's really cool about this is if you take this and you flip it, you play it backwards, you get exactly the same shape. You get exactly the same first hearing the guitar backwards and then forwards. And so the next clip I'm going to show you is the clip that you just saw, but it's backwards, it's flipped. And so you can look for the word instinct flipped and upside down on that side of the screen, which he says at the end of the clip, so that's at the beginning. And then I have these annotations here again for you.
That's it.
This is just one tiny example. All over in this score, there are like melodies that are forwards and backwards. There are sounds that are forwards and backwards. It's amazing, like the layers that went into this score. At first glance, we might describe the music we've heard so far in Futurama, Chrono Trigger, and Tenet as having no physical source in the story world. That is, as non-diegetic. This is the film music theory term we would use to describe it. The characters cannot hear this music. This is in contrast to the music of Link's Ocarina, which has a physical source in the story world. The characters can hear this sound. We would call this diegetic music. It's part of the story world. And you'll see underscore is another name for non-diegetic. It's the music the composers write that goes in the background. And diegetic or source music is the stuff the characters can hear that gets included like in the film, if you will. This might seem like a question of space, the boundary between these two things, but it's also a question of time. Film music theorist Benjamin Winters describes the difference as whether music appears to exist in the time and narrative space of the diegesis of the story world, or whether it appears to narrate at a temporal distance from that space. But music as time complicates this boundary. Is music the sound of time in the story world, or is it the sound of some kind of cosmic time outside of the story world? This is a hard question to answer because time itself has no obvious physical source, and yet music can give it a sound. Music can give time a kind of body. Film music theorist Robin Stilwell has a term that can help us. She says the line between what's physically real in the story world and what's not isn't a line at all. She says it's a space, it's a place, and she calls it the fantastical gap. She describes it as the thickness of glass, a liminal space of power and transformation. I think music as time lives here. Time is physical, yet also kind of intangible in a way, and music as time can express this through the fantastical gap, this in-between space between what's real in the story world and what is outside of it. So sci-fi and fantasy also show time as something malleable. As in this scene from Star Trek Discovery, Season 2 specifically, when Michael Burnham, who's played by Sonequa Martin Green, travels through a wormhole. Music in this scene expresses the wormhole's folding of time through a point of synchronization, a sync point between the music and the film, and through a change in harmony. So here's the synchronization point, the sync point, and it will be highlighted by a flash of blue, a blue rectangle around the frame. I will also try to cue you to alert you to the thing is about to happen. And we'll watch it a couple of times. So here's the synchronization point. And so in that moment, it looks like Michael Burnham is singing. Just as the camera cuts to a close-up on her face, the music hits an emphasized downbeat. Her mouth is open with sparks seeming to fly out of it, and light is a common metaphor for voice. Voice as light is a metaphor you hear especially in fantasy. When you think about incantations. And she's even got, it's very hard to see at this moment, but she even is doing this gesture with her hand that is iconic of something a singer would do on a stage, particularly on a long note, right? Watch it one more time. I think this invites us to hear the singing voice as Burnham's voice. She is in the throes of time folding in on itself, of 2 points in time colliding. So why shouldn't she have 2 voices? The singing voice perhaps comes from a peaceful future on the other side of the wormhole, and her present terrified scream overlaps with this. In addition, you'll notice after this sync point, her scream reverses. It becomes an inhale, maybe indicating some symmetry in the wormhole. Harmony does something cool here too. Leading up to this synchronization point, the harmony has largely been D minor. It's kind of a sad sounding harmony, yeah. But after this synchronization point, we hear B flat major. Oh, no, I can't do it. I was totally gonna bring like a little keyboard, and I was like, all right, I got through D minor, that was good. Trust me on this. So B flat major, it switches from sad to happy. But there's more going on than that because D minor and B flat major, these two triads, share two notes. They have D and F in common. So in a way, the harmony also represents Michael Burnham being carried between two times that are overlapping. And I've got an annotation here to help you hear that and see that. We'll watch this clip one more time. D minor, sad. Bright. B flat major, triumphant. And they have this D, F third that overlaps between them. It's so cool. It's just cool to look at on a piano even, but next time. All right, so it might be helpful to contrast Burnham's leap with one made by Eleanor Arroway in the 1997 film Contact. Here we will see that music is not the sound of the wormhole. Instead, it's the sound of the space that the wormhole warps. It's not the interior of the wormhole. It's what the wormhole warps.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
In this launch sequence, as the control ship is drawn toward the intense gravity of the machine, the music grows stronger and more urgent. The wormhole itself is full of sound effects and as absent of music as it is of time. When the wormhole delivers Ellie back into space and time, the music slowly returns, like a glassy lake we know soon will be rippled again as she goes through a series of wormholes. And so we'll hear that now. You're going to hear a lot of chaos. She's going to come to a stopping point, and the music is just going to creep in so slowly you might not even notice it until it's there and it's time to leave again.
There's a light source ahead. Brilliant. Blue light. There's no radiation.
You hear a slight pulsing. It's becoming more resonant.
It's a star. I must have
Voices,
gone through a wormhole.
barely. Slightly more full-bodied. You can hear them more clearly. Oh, it's about the pitch that they were at. It was really subtle. And then the machine tears space apart again. And we're back into the emptiness. I love Contact. If you couldn't tell, it's a great film. And a great book. Speaking of books, the sci-fi author Madeleine L'Engle, who wrote A Wrinkle in Time, used the term tesseract to describe the folding of time. And we'll see a brief demonstration of that by Storm Reed as the character Meg in the 2018 film adaptation here.
See? The inner rose in my other hand. Instantaneously.
So you fold space.
Kind of. Full time.
And then she goes on to say, well, Wrinkle Time, because that's the title of the book. I like it. So the 2014 film Interstellar adapts this term, but treats it as something more geometrical and less bridge-like. Let's watch as astronaut Joseph Cooper, played by Matthew McConaughey, falls into a tesseract that has been built by, hold on to your seats, a 5-dimensionally evolved human race at the center of a black hole. All right, here you go. We'll see more, but I want to point out that music here is the sound of the tesseract. The second Cooper's feet cross the edge, a pronounced, echoey, percussive strike and a rippling organ evoke the blocky, rhythmically dense visual texture of the tesseract's structure. So let's just watch that little moment again. When Cooper stops falling and finds himself floating, able to observe the details of the Tesseract's many surfaces, the music shifts from emphasizing a 16th note level pulse. So if we were keeping time here, a lot of the music is happening at about 4 times the pace of the regular beat. It switches at this moment when he slows down to really observe the wormhole to half that, to an 8th note pulse, we would say. Emphasizing this level of time. So we can watch that, listen to it here, and I might, well, we'll see. I think we'll be able to hear it.
Somewhere in their 5th dimension, they saved him.
What the hell is they? Why would they want to help us?
I don't know, but they constructed this 3-dimensional space inside their 5-dimensional reality.
There are probably better examples of that slower emphasis on that slower level of pulse. But I think you can tell that it's not as rhythmically active as when he falls into the wormhole, Tesseract, excuse me, and everything is flying past him. So the music is still articulating kind of the rigid visual structure that's very repetitious. But now, at this pace, it exposes Cooper's ability to see the detail that's around him. When Cooper realizes the role he has to play in the Tesseract, why he's here, he begins to travel through it again more quickly, and the music again increases its rhythmic density. It goes back to emphasizing this faster level of sub-pulse, if we want to think about it that way. And this expresses the infinitely complex structure of the Tesseract, as Cooper says. So these are his words.
They didn't choose me, they chose her.
What, Cooper?
To save the world.
Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
One little girl's bedroom, every moment. It's infinitely complex. They have access to infinite time and space, but they're not bound by anything. They can find a specific place in time. They can communicate. That's why I'm here. I'm gonna find a way to tell Murph, just like I found this moment.
So you can hear, perhaps, the organ especially is more active. There are more moving lines under it. It might be subtle, but you can feel there's more movement here. Moving on from tesseracts and wormholes, some sci-fi and fantasy characters warp time by looping it.
This is time. Endless looped time.
The music that underscores Dr. Strange's time loop isolates the time loop from the present by using a harpsichord, an instrument from the Baroque era. The harpsichord's timbre also references time by giving each note a clock-like edge. Dut, 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 dut. It cycles through, and bear with me, a second inversion C minor triad, which is a C minor triad, a C minor chord, that has been turned on its head. What's usually the highest note in this chord is now the lowest note. So instead of bum, 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 we hear the harpsichord going bum, 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 bum. When you put these notes in this order, the triad sounds like it will never end, which is quite fitting for a time loop. Let's watch a bit more of this clip, and I want you to notice how that figure in the harpsichord, bum, 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 becomes more and more strongly emphasized the longer they are locked in this loop.
Dormammu, I've come to bargain.
What is happening?
Just as you gave Caecilius powers from your dimension, I brought a little power from mine. This is time. Endless looped time. Dormammu, come to bargain.
You cannot do this forever.
Actually, I can.
Actually, he can. That's so good. Yeah, so you hear this bum, 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 bum moves into the strings. It translates into the full orchestra, and it's really taken up, gets more and more established the more times they go through this time loop, which I think is really cool. Another kind of repetition of time occurs in multiple timelines. which create some of the most complicated plots in sci-fi and fantasy. And we see here one person's map of the timelines for the Legend of Zelda franchise. Fascinating, all over the place. And here, I greatly admire the person that took the time to work this out for the anime Steins Gate. This is phenomenal. So we're going to focus on the anime Steins Gate for a moment. This is a prime example of multiple timelines. So over the course of this series, tritagonist Okabe Rintaro has been leaping through time to try to save his love interest, Kirusu, and his childhood friend, Mayuri. Finding a timeline that saves them both has seemed impossible until this critical moment, which we'll watch now.
Forgive me.
Okabe! You want to know how I feel?
Karisu!
Okabe, you should know by now.
The music in this scene enters only after Okabe releases the enter key, setting this final time leap in motion. Because the music enters at the same time that he activates this leap, I hear the music as the sound of this timeline, of the single timeline that can save his loved ones. A desire to save loved ones is a common motive for time travelers, but the structure of time may or may not permit this. Consider this excerpt from the heavy opening montage from the film Arrival, underscored by Max Richter's On the Nature of Daylight. And I'm not playing the entire sequence because I have learned that if I do, I can't speak after. It's a very moving and heavy montage. So you're just going to get an excerpt of it here.
Memory is a strange thing. It doesn't work like I thought it did. We are so bound by time, by its order.
In this clip, Dr. Banks, played by Amy Adams, describes time as linear. And in the remainder of the montage, we witness the joy and sorrow in her daughter's tragically short 12-year life. This linear kind of time is what philosopher John McTaggart would call the A theory of time. In this model, time moves in one direction, progressing from future to present to past. Because in this model time is passing, it is also called the dynamic model of time, or the dynamic theory of time. During the course of the film, Dr. Banks learns the language of a higher dimensional species that allows her now to experience time in a new way. Consider this excerpt from the closing montage.
Despite knowing the journey and where it leads, I embrace it. And I welcome every moment of it.
I would argue that, no, we need to talk about B theory of time. Dr. Banks now sees time, all of time, not as linear, but as a physical dimension, as tangible as length, width, and height. This is McTaggart's B theory of time. Time isn't passing, time simply is. For this reason, it is also called the static universe theory. I would argue that in both montages, Max Richter's On the Nature of Daylight gives B theories, nonlinear time, a sonic body. The music itself is slow and repetitious. These are both characteristics that can destroy the clear passage of time. The piece also disrupts time's arrow through symmetry. And we have a quote from Max Richter here, the composer, who says, "The piece is structured as a sort of palindrome. It has all sorts of internal geometrical symmetries." Deepening the significance of the piece's slow, repetitious, and palindromic structure, music scholar Timothy Farrand puts it this way. He says, this type of monotony of phrase, of music that circles around the same set of harmonies, exists within time instead of moving through it. Film music scholar Isabella Van Elfren might call this experience harmonic listening. She writes, as harmony moves from cadence to cadence, time moves in smaller or larger circles. One more quote. Film scholar Nancy Epton gives words to my experience of this music, describing its ability to evoke a nonlinear structure of time, not just in the last scene in the film, but also in the beginning. She writes, the images of Louise as she holds the hands of her baby daughter are powerful beyond words. They become synonymous with Richter's meditative strings, just as the images of Hannah's life are entwined with Richter's high oscillating vibrations. Through Richter's music, the director, Villeneuve, crafts a narrative soundscape that transcends traditional verbal exposition. Music does things that words can't do here, is a simpler way of saying that. Oh, there you go, Epton. So we have seen that music in sci-fi and fantasy media can communicate time's momentum, speeding it up, slowing it down, stopping time, and reversing time. We have seen that music can convey time's malleability, embodying its folding, its looping, and the nature of its branching. And we have seen that music can help us imagine the very structure of time as nonlinear. Having explored these many powers of music to embody time in the context of sci-fi and fantasy, I would like to leave you today with the thought that music's temporal power carries beyond these contexts. And perhaps sci-fi and fantasy give us a way to talk about the kinds of time travel we do through music already. Thank you. If you have comments or questions or really cool sci-fi or fantasy examples that I should look at, I would love to hear them. And feel free to follow up with me as well. If you're like, we need to talk about this example, I'm here for it. So I would love to know about any cool examples that you all know of. And thank you for your time. I didn't actually specifically say that. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. All right, well, oh, yes, question? Yeah.
So I'm remembering the series, I think there was maybe 3 seasons, Dark. Did you?
Oh, okay, so I know that this exists, but I haven't delved into it yet. Do you have a direction I should take?
I'm not smart enough to talk about the music and its interplay with it's all about time travel and string theory and the like. And while I couldn't articulate what the music was, it was incredibly powerful, and it certainly brought a deeper sense of what was going on, particularly during the travel and cueing you when you were, because it wasn't always clear, were you in the past, present, future, or what each was. But the first 2 seasons were a lot better than the third. But
Also noted, okay.
anyways, it was great. And it was Scandinavian, if I recall, so you can get it with either the subtitles or dubbed. I like the subtitles dubbed.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, that was like a shadow. Like, oh yeah, Dark. I've heard of this. So I appreciate the prompt to look into that. That's very cool. Thank you. Well, my email address may or may not be very visible there, but it's cnoden@sci-fi.org. at adams.edu. If you think of any other cool examples and you want to shoot an email my way, I'm happy to always learn more about sci-fi and fantasy and music. So.
Well, I got.
Yeah.
So you talked about Doctor Strange, but
oh yeah,
when you're talking about time, especially, you got to talk about the Doctor.
I know.
And, that the original theme from the series that I guess it was Delia Derbyshire did a lot of the work on it, but it's a very interesting. I mean, I couldn't analyze it either, but it's got a lot going on in there. You know, with the way the music goes and the sound itself.
Very, very cool. Yeah, Doctor Who is massive. Oh my gosh, it's this massive franchise, and I've been a bit intimidated, to be honest, but you have just encouraged me to go in and face the Doctor. So.
Yeah, I was watching it when I was like 10 years old, and it was the third Doctor. So.
Awesome. Making note of the third Doctor specifically.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily, it's not necessarily the best.
Yeah.
It was definitely the cheap special effects.
Yes.
You know,
yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to talk more when I have more experience with Doctor Who. But thank you for bringing Doctor Who into the room. Yeah.
I know very little about music, as you know, but when you were talking about music that the characters are experiencing versus music that we experience but the character isn't hearing, one thing I've seen sometimes in movies is where a character's listening to the radio, they're hearing this song, then there's kind of a transition and the song shifts to, usually it's like kind of mono on the stereo poor quality, or the radio poor quality, then it shifts to this very loud, high quality, and then it's something that we're suddenly experiencing that the character is no longer experiencing.
Yeah, yeah, and you sometimes see the reverse of that too. There are different ways, different like terms people have used to talk about that shift, but I like thinking about it as like crossing the fantastical gap. Like, what has happened to this music that was in the character's world and now it's in our world? Like, that's kind of amazing and magical, and it's part of what makes cinema like immersive, I think. It would be cool to look at that in Back to the Future. I bet that happens in Back to the Future. There's so much, pop music referenced in that. There's another one, a big one I need to look more closely at. Yeah. Yes?
I guess that comment made me think about Outlander.
Oh.
Because Outlander, each, without giving any spoilers, each book kind of is a season of the show. And then in each season of the show, it's the same theme song, but it's done in the style of that time period.
Yes.
So when they go like into colonial times, there's a bit more of a colonial twist on it. And when they go into, the very first one is very like Celtic and old. And anyway, so yeah, and that whole series obviously is about a lot of different time traveling things. And also there's really hot guys in it. So.
Awesome.
Sorry. The president is here. I'll find a fire Nice, thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, one thing I didn't mention as much as like the style of music evoking like a time period, like the style itself, and so that sounds like a super interesting example.
Rudimentary way to do it, but it's still neat.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that to my attention also. Yeah. Yes.
Going back to Zelda Skyward Sword, though, the I think it's Lanryu mines, I might be saying it wrong at this point, both the present day and when it's the ruins versus the back in time when it wasn't, the contrast to the music too. It's been a while since I played the game, so.
Yeah. I actually haven't played Skyward Sword yet. I know, but I love watching speedruns actually. But that would be super interesting to look at, like the same landscape but in two different times, and what is the music doing? Because I know like the theme for time. Time has its like own theme also in the Zelda universe, and you hear that in different places. Like the Temple of Time has kind of this fragmented piano version of it that's really cool. So it'd be interesting to look at like, yeah, that same landscape at two different times.
Misremembering it incorrectly, but it has like the same bass rhythm, I think, for both versions.
Okay.
But one has a bit more natural, I guess, harmony, and one's more like just mechanical.
Interesting. Oh, I'm so excited to look at that.
It's kind of like, it makes me think of railroad irons being beaten on.
When you said mechanical, I was like, does this go like a steampunk direction maybe?
It does a little.
Yeah. Oh, steampunk, gears, clocks. That's a whole thing with time. Oh, very cool. Anyway, yeah. Thank you for pointing me towards that piece of the Zelda universe.
It's really cool music no matter what. So.
Yes, true. Yeah.
Another show, there's Farscape.
Oh, Farscape! I have watched Farscape. Actually, so I had an example of him going through the wormhole at the beginning that I ended up taking out. But and I want to look at all the wormhole scenes because there's also like when he's like lost in, or he's like out of time, right? He's talking to the character he calls Einstein, and there's like that whole world. But one of the kind of cool things that the music does behind his first travel through a wormhole in Farscape is it ascends, it goes through kind of this scalar pattern, and it stops just before he enters the wormhole, and then the wormhole has like this groove. It's like its own, it's like a roller coaster, it's like a party. And then on the other side, where he's somewhere that he's never been before, the music picks back up right where it left, like however many seconds before. You know, lots of music has happened, and it picks right back up from where it left and keeps ascending, which is, I don't know, I think it's kind of cool. But yeah, Farscape is, I want to spend more time with that one too. I'm so glad somebody brought up Farscape.
Yeah, there's several time jumping episodes within it.
Yes, yeah.
Dimension hopping too, that one's fun.
Yes, yeah, and then, yes. If you send all those places I should look, like, look here, yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting too, like, seeing the big budget blockbuster movies and knowing that they did a lot with the soundtrack and everything, but that's one thing. But then I never thought that like Futurama or Farscape or these things that, they were weekly, I'm sure they didn't have huge budgets and everything. I don't know who the composers were or anything, but it's interesting that they still managed to work in those kinds of touches, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I would love to learn more about the process for writing the music on both of those shows. Yeah, that's something that I want to learn more about because it's pretty amazing when you, as you said, when you think about the fact that it's serial and yeah, being produced on a much tighter timeline than like the big blockbustery films. Yeah, I would like to learn more about that for those series specifically. Yeah.
I don't know if it's been forever since I watched Stargate, but there's a few time travel episodes. Be interesting to see what they did.
Yes, I had Stargate. Yep, it's there. It was not on my list. It's on my list now. Oh. Yes, awesome. Well, I see 7 o'clock on this computer over here, and I don't want to keep you past time. I appreciate that you came out and stayed this late this evening. So thank you so much. I truly enjoyed getting to connect with you. Thank you.